A very warm welcome to the 16th episode of the podcast of the World Wind Energy Association, The World of Wind Power. Today we are talking about an important country, one of the, in terms of the industrial capacities, most important countries on Earth, and that is Japan. And it's my great pleasure that today I will speak about the wind power situation in Japan with Professor Chuichi Arakawa. Professor Arakawa, he is a vice president of the World Wind Energy Association for many years now. Originally, now retired, a professor, one of the leading professors in Japan for wind power. But it's my pleasure to welcome, and maybe you can also introduce yourself. Chuichi, a warm welcome first to you as well.
Thank you very much for your kind introduction. It is my also great pleasure to join you in the podcast. And at first, I'd like to introduce myself. As I hope Stefan explained, I'm a Professor Emeritus, retired professor in the University of Tokyo. After I stayed in the same campus for around 50 years, of course, I continued. My major was mechanical engineering, focusing on fluid dynamics. I'm exactly academia and mechanical engineering. Now I contribute to the project formation offshore, especially of offshore wind in Japan, cooperating with central and local governments. After retiring from Tokyo University, in short, Tokyo University, as a professor, 8 years ago, I had temporary jobs as a designated professor in Kyoto and Nagoya. I started the research of wind energy from 2000. It means around 20 years ago, when you had a good advance of wind power as first stage in Europe. Furthermore, some memorial Kyoto Protocol had been published 2 years before then I started the research. At that time, my colleague, elder colleague, criticized me, saying in the following, do you start the research of windmill, not wind power, not wind turbine, windmill in Japan, Kazaguruma, very small size of windmill. As a professor of our university, we are our university, leading university in Japan and the world. There are neither strong winds nor places for wind turbines and farms in Japan. Please stop these funny researches in which you will not be able to raise research funds, project money. It's some criticism remarks from the elder professors. Of course, I decided to start while there were so many kind of enemies on all sides in 2000 at that time. But I continued to do activities wind energy since then. As for World Wind Energy Association, I am a representative of JWEA, Japan Wind Energy Association, to WWEA, and continue to be a vice president of WWEA for a long time, more around 20 years. I'm very sorry, too long for other board members. Anyway, JWEA, to which I belong to, covers technology and science in Japan, although Japan Wind Power Association, so-called JWPA, covers industries in Japan. Please pay attention. We have two associations of wind power in Japan.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this I understand. So you really, I mean, what you are telling me about your experience
Wait
when
a
you
minute,
started.
I hear from you. I
Yeah,
cannot. Okay, now okay.
yes. So what you are telling me about your when you started working for wind energy sounds very familiar to me because when I started working for renewable energy and wind energy, also many people they looked at me and Is there something serious? I believe today we are at the point that really everybody understands wind power is worldwide now providing 10%, more than 10% of the power. So it is something very serious and it's a multi-billion industry. And it's of course, you've contributed a lot to this in those, yeah, you said quarter of a century, which is, of course, great that we've been able to achieve that. Now, maybe we can look a bit about the Japanese history in this. It's very interesting always to hear how countries started. And I know that Japan started, of course, earlier, was one of the early movers and started research already in the 20th century. Today is one of the medium-sized wind power markets, and one of those countries that has also contributed technology development. Can you briefly explain the history in Japan of wind power?
Thank you for your good questions. Of course, it's very difficult for me to explain in short. I'm a professor in mechanical engineering, but I'd like to make short explanations. In the decade of 2000, we had strong technologies from wind industries, such as, it's okay for me to mention the exact company name,
Yes, yeah, yeah. I
Mitsubishi.
think it's
Okay.
interesting for our audience.
Heavy industry, MHI, who exported their products to the USA in large quantities. They
Mm,
were proud of high performance technology of energy conversion with employing the aeronautical blades as an aircraft diversion, very high technologies. However, they, MHI, didn't like to sell them to the domestic market in Japan.
mhm.
I can barely guess the reason why they don't like to do it in the following. MHI is a leading company of energy facility in Japan,
Maybe just
including,
briefly, that's Mitsubishi Heavy Industries, right?
yes,
MHI.
Mitsubishi Heavy Industry. Not
Mitsubishi,
here,
everybody
MHI.
knows for sure. Mm,
Okay. Mitsubishi. But please pay attention to the two companies. MHI's Mitsubishi Heavy Industries. But
mhm,
sometimes in offshore wind, we call Mitsubishi. But Mitsubishi, in this case, Mitsubishi means Mitsubishi Trading Companies.
mhm,
Perfectly different MHI, Mitsubishi Heavy Industry. Please, we need to pay attention. But anyway, uh, MHI is a strong interest in another system of energy nuclear, of course, fossil,
mhm,
everything. So they don't like to change the formation of the energy system in Japan.
mhm,
Even after our big disaster, 2011, they continue to keep doing similar actions while waiting for the change of energy policies of the government for
mhm,
carbon neutrality. Finally, MHI gives up also to keep the branch company, MHI Vestas, where they produce a big offshore turbines. It's our great pity. In Japan, we have another second example of excellent technology, the so-called downwind turbines
mhm,
proposed by the former name of Subaru, Subaru Company. Later, they were moved to Hitachi Company, finally
mhm,
Hitachi. Fundamentally, they would be available for the mountain area with an uphill slope, but furthermore, later we strongly expected the downwind turbines new idea was the technology to be popular in the floating offshore wind with free control system in the
mhm,
future. So we strongly expected to keep these high technologies, but Hitachi also stopped development of downwind turbines due to the small market of wind power. in Japan, at first, the government suggested a small market at that time. It's a big problem. Finally, we had several high technologies. We lost several high technology of wind turbines in Japan. However, we purely engineers strongly continue to expect for good designers, good researchers of wind turbines will be active in near future, cooperating each other. But anyway, now all of company manufacturers in Japan are lost, disappears now.
Well, that is a pity. I mean, I think many people know that in the early years of the, well, somebody recently called it it's like the gold rush in California when there were the first big wind farms were installed. There was Danish companies playing a very important role, but as you just described, also Japanese and in particular Mitsubishi. That's very well known. And you explain now why they did not really start to sell on the Japanese market. Now, Japan still was for quite many years always one of the top 10 countries or so. What's the status today of wind power and renewable energy, and who are the actors? You just mentioned that some of these early pioneers, which contributed a lot internationally, that they've disappeared. What is the situation now?
Main actors, something like that. Mm, mm,
What's nowadays kind of
it,
the share that wind power has, and what's the plan for
yeah,
the
at
future?
first I'd like to share the wind power to other energies. Uh, I have already explained the very negative comments in Japanese government or Japanese market. But now our government has also declared the carbon neutral policy by 2050 in the former Prime Minister Suga in 2020. Furthermore, he announced a sixth energy basic plan in 2021 next year, in which the 46% reduction of carbon dioxide by 2030 comparing to 2013, and 50% of wind power in the generation mix by 2030 as a target, in addition to carbon neutral by 2050. It's a good target because we have only 1% of generation mix of wind power of Japan. Now, although most of your countries exceeds around 20% or something like that, just 1%. It is a great pity. Anyway, total accumulation of wind power is 5.8 gigawatt nowadays. Of course, we have another 8% generation, energy generation mix of solar
Oh yeah,
now,
okay.
8%.
So it's 8 times bigger
Excellent.
than wind energy at the moment.
Yes, you are right. And their target is 14 to 16% by 2030 in an energy basic plan 3 years ago. Our target of wind power is around just 5%, but very big for us, 5%. But for solar, 14, 16, 3 times, something like that. And furthermore, we have the historically high generation mix of hydraulic power, 8%. In future, 11%. The government has just announced in March, the new seventh energy basic plan, where they propose a target by 2040, such as 4 to 8% of wind power it's really strange. 5% in 2030 in the former explaining former policy, but now they announce 4 to 8%. It's a little strange, but anyway, uh, for solar, 23 to 29%,
Mm.
totally 40 to 50% of renewable energy. So it means you can easily estimate the government highly evaluated solar compared to wind in Japan, which is my great pity.
Why do you
It's a
think is that the case? Why is there much more focus on solar than on wind?
It's a very difficult to explain. Fundamentally, in the old times, the government didn't like to support wind power. They say in the big meetings that wind turbine would be matured technology,
Mhm.
but solar is a developing technology for semiconductor,
Mhm.
not for renewable energy.
Mhm.
So it means the government didn't pay any attention to the renewable energy. They
Mhm.
did focus on another industry,
Mhm.
semiconductor, something like that. It's
Mhm.
a kind of history. Even now, we Japanese are a little conservative. We don't like to change the systems by ourselves. Now we have a big history to develop the industry after the World War, something like that. We
Mhm.
had a good success story. So finally, most of Japanese strongly want to keep this success story and the result in the similar conditions. So they didn't like to change the energy mix. But now, of course, we have the big target, carbon neutral. We are now forced to change it gradually and gradually.
Mhm.
Okay.
So but I understand there's not so much focus on onshore wind. I've also, of course, talked to some
Mm.
people who are saying that it's really difficult. But what's the ratio? Because what I hear is that, and what we know is that there are
Yeah,
now
first I'd
bigger
like to
plants.
explain the
Mhm.
number of the onshore and offshore. For
Mhm.
the time being, the share of offshore wind is just 5%, 0.28 gigawatt, 280 megawatt, even for offshore, to 5.8 gigawatt of total capacity. It means 5.3 or 5.4 comes from the onshore, of course, in
Mhm.
Japan, wind.
Mhm.
However, the social acceptance for onshore is now so severe that the large size of new wind farm onshore, it's very difficult to realize it.
Mhm.
Some governors in the local government declares they don't like to put onshore wind in their prefecture without some strong relation. What shall I say? Uh, promotive, special promotive area in the industry. But how do they assign the promotion area for onshore wind? They say they wait for the proposal of the town, city, mayors, something like that. But most of mayors, most of the uh, head of the village don't like to accept the promotion area for
Mhm.
onshore wind. It means it's impossible for us to assign the new uh, in each local area.
Mhm.
So now, very small size of design will be acceptable, but large size of wind farm onshore, it's impossible to realize it.
That's very unfortunate because we know from many countries that people see that there's benefit, brings value, jobs, etc., to especially local areas. I mean, like my home country in the
Mm.
north of Germany, you've visited those places often. It's now one of the biggest income sources for the people who are living there. What is that the main reason? What keeps wind power back in Japan? I mean, mainly onshore wind. Is it this local
Yes, of course,
resistance more?
it's the same reasons in the world, noise, ultrasound noise, or ultra low frequency noise, and some shade, or so many components of the wind and the landscape and something like that.
But that ultrasound
So
has been
now our government,
it's misinformation. That's just wrong because we know that sound from
yes,
every road
of
is
course,
ultrasound.
I
Mm,
yeah, yeah, we understand you very well. Of course, our government has already fixed a good, what shall I say, rule to
mm,
accept the onshore wind.
mm,
Please keep the distance of 1 kilometer to the inhabitant house, something like that.
mhm,
If we keep the distance to the house, the central government say it's acceptable, but
mhm,
local government no, because look, the mayor has what shall I say elections every 4 years as a political persons. Now most of mayors who accept the onshore wind were faulted in the election. Now the next for the next election, the mayors or the governors are very conservative for accepting
mm.
wind power. It's little different from science, technology. It comes from some, what shall I say, a kind of the mind, a Japanese, some special mind, something like that. Of course, it's crazy for me, of course, but it's very difficult to explain.
Mhm,
So instead of the onshore wind turbines, the central government has a large target of offshore wind, such as 5 gigawatt by 2030, 30 gigawatt, 30 to 45 gigawatt by 2050. Furthermore, industry group JWPA proposes 100 gigawatt
Oh
by
yeah. Mm,
2050.
mhm.
For offshore wind, the government accepts this development. So it is very easy for us to make a big plan, a challenging plan in the offshore wind now.
So that's different. But when we look again into the different parts of Japan, are there any regions where you see there is more wind power installed? Like in some countries, you have windier places, but Japan is an island as such.
Yeah,
How is that geographic distribution?
yeah. Of course, generally speaking, uh, in the north area of Japan is good for wind power. A
Mm,
strong wind. It means the name of the island, Hokkaido area.
mhm,
Hokkaido has so much potential, including offshore and onshore.
mhm.
However, we do not have any strong grid connections, electric grid connection from
Okay.
Hokkaido to main island, Honshu, Tokyo, or something like that. So now the government has decided to install a high voltage DC line in the ocean. So we are making strong efforts to do project formation, especially for offshore wind in Hokkaido area. Furthermore, Japanese seaside of North Honshu Island has also many potentials. Uh, Furthermore, in this area, they have good opinion, good social acceptance for offshore wind, even if they are fishermen. So we'd like to develop offshore wind in north part of Honshu and Hokkaido. So every month I need to go to these north prefectures and Hokkaido to have good to make exchange of the opinions to the local people, including fishermen. But they are very good discussions now.
Do you know why they have positive attitude? Are they going to benefit from this, or because we also hear in some parts of the world that fishermen are opposing because they are afraid they can catch less. We know from some
Mm,
offshore wind farms now
mm,
that there are more fish at the end because they can better breed. But why do the fishermen in the
mm,
northern part of Japan, how is their attitude?
mm.
Why is it as it is?
Yeah. Of course, the local people in the northern part are waiting for the chance to develop the local area
Mm.
financially.
Ah, okay.
Uh, Comparing with south part of Japan or east areas, Pacific Ocean area of Honshu, uh, in Nihonkai area, uh, the the total amount of fishery is not so large.
Mhm.
So they are making strong efforts to catch young people to follow their jobs as a fisherman. But recently, young people don't like to join the fishery in the Nippon Sea area in the northern part. So
Mhm.
they are looking for the chance to develop each other while taking the fishery and a kind of wind power. So it's a kind of combination to to make the area happy, rich, and something like that. So they are very kind to negotiate with wind sectors or the governments to
Mhm.
develop
Mhm.
offshore wind.
That's
Yeah,
very interesting because when we come to that point, they see some concrete benefits for them, obviously, that I know this is really very, very
yeah,
important. Now, when we
yeah.
look in
Of course,
now looking into
yes.
the future,
In,
please.
of course, we have some rules for offshore wind, for example. We have the kind of the, what shall I say, donations from the wind sectors.
Mhm.
The government has already fixed to the donations. For example, 250 Japanese yen per kilowatt
Mhm.
every year. It means in some project, the wind sector should pay 5 billion Japanese yen for 30 years. 30
Mhm.
years. So they can use the donation money to develop their areas. But they say it's not so large. It's arranged much more, something like that. But anyway, formally, we fixed 250 Japanese yen per
Mhm.
kilowatt. It's a kind of formal rule. Furthermore, I push the wind sectors to uh, cooperate with local people to make the industrialized this area for supply chain construction, something like that.
Very important. And as an association, we also work on that, and certainly something the whole industry worldwide needs to think more about how to work with the local communities. Now, when we look into the future, and as usual, time is running so fast, and it's very interesting to hear from you about the situation, but let's look a little bit into the future.
Mhm.
What are the prospects now for wind energy and for renewable energy in general? We know that in spite of what you said, 2011, I think people outside Japan mainly, they just know the word Fukushima. After that happened, nuclear had some backdrops, but it seems it's not completely ruled out now in Japan. Uh, will Japan ever reach 100% renewables in your perspective? And how is the development now going to happen? What is your expectation?
Yeah, I'd like to say so many remarks in these topics. And first, I have already explained the new energy basic plan of the government, seventh plans, but
Mhm,
they don't include the sentence reduce the reliance on nuclear power as much as possible,
mhm,
which surely was included in the formal basic plan after our disaster, Fukushima, something like that.
mhm,
It means they have a plan to support the next stage of nuclear. It's a big problem. I'm very afraid personally that nuclear power will come back in order to be carbon neutral without carbon dioxide. This direction may disturb the development of wind power and renewable energy in Japan. But of course, we have the good target, carbon neutral by 2050. But however, we cannot conclude the 100% renewables in Japan for the time being, as I have already explained, nuclear. So it's a big problem for us. Furthermore, energy security is the most important thing in the future. All of the renewable facilities now have come to Japan from foreign countries.
mhm.
Now, wind turbines are imported ones, and PV also are imported goods.
Which is
So it will
unfortunate
be a
because
big
Japan did
advantage.
that. No? Like 20 years ago, Japan was one of the big suppliers for wind
Mm,
turbines.
mm.
Mhm,
Yeah, but for the time being, no manufacturers. It's a
mhm,
big problem. So we need to, uh, what shall I say, uh, yes, we had better manufacturing the facility of renewables in Japan. Of course,
mhm,
otherwise, sometimes we have some hard battles in the economics and something like that. Furthermore, we have the trading company, Mitsubishi, for example,
mhm,
uh, big offshore wind is now organized by Mitsubishi as a first round. But trading company is a little different from the, what shall I say, electric utility company or the small size of the wind sector, which organized onshore wind. So it's very difficult. Historical wind sector. So what shall I say? Now, big companies pay attention to the big economy, big systems. They they don't mind. I guess they don't have strong mind to pay attention to local people and renewables. So furthermore, we need to find good solutions now to distribute some of their profits to local people
mhm,
through giant power sectors like the trading companies and electric utility companies. Otherwise, local people also will be against offshore wind too. So we need to have a good collaborations. And furthermore, they should pay back some profits to the local people,
Mhm.
considering that wind and solar is, what shall I say, resources of local area. We
That's
need
true.
to go back to local people getting electricity with renewable energy, even if the wind sector or PV sector becomes huge size, something like that.
Mhm.
So it is equally explained. It's my conclusion. We should keep the idea that resources of renewables comes from local area.
Mhm.
We should take into account local people paying, cooperating with the benefit of the profit, but uh, keeping each other profits. Yes.
Yes, I think that's an excellent conclusion of our discussion. You've explained very well how the situation in Japan is, that after really a time when Japan contributed a lot to the global development, now trying to find out what's the best way. And I believe the focus on the people is certainly a very important answer that is not only relevant for Japan, but worldwide. Chuichi, it was a great
Thank you.
pleasure listening to you and hear your insights from Japan. Let me say thank you from my side for all the work that you've been doing. Very important for the progress in Japan. And also wish you for the work in Japan good luck. We certainly will also continue our work collaboration internationally. With this, I'd say again, thank you. Also, thank you to our audience for listening. We hope you find it very interesting as well. And with this, we say goodbye for today.
Okay, thank you very much. Goodbye.